The siren wail of the proximity alarm shattered the tranquility aboard the Herald, a vessel meant for discovery, not war. Commander Celine Hart, her brow furrowed in concentration, stared at the blinking lights on the console that mapped the invisible border just breached. "Damn it," she muttered, eyes scanning the data that confirmed the worst. They had drifted into Krellak's territory. The bridge of the Herald was bathed in the soft glow of holographic displays, casting eerie shadows over the crew's tense faces. Outside, the backdrop of space, a tapestry of distant stars and nebula, loomed indifferent to the human plight. Celine's heart raced as she awaited the inevitable response from the Krellaks, a species known for their militant disdain of trespassers. "Commander, incoming transmission," announced Lieutenant Jax Harrow, his voice steady despite the rising tension. The screen flickered to life, revealing the harsh features of a Krellak's officer, his skin the color of deep space, eyes like cold stars. "You have violated the sovereign territory of the Krellak's alliance," the officer declared, his tone devoid of warmth. "Stand down and prepare to be boarded." Celine rose, her stature commanding. "This is a scientific mission," she responded, her voice calm but firm. "We meant no intrusion. Our navigational systems malfunctioned. We request leniency to correct our course." The Krellak's sneer was the only answer before the transmission cut off. Celine turned to her crew, her gaze sweeping over each member, instilling a silent strength. "Prepare for potential hostilities. Jax, get me a direct line to Earth Command. We need diplomatic intervention, now." As Jax hurried to comply, Celine paced the narrow confines of the bridge. Each step was measured, her mind racing through protocols and contingencies. This border, a mere line drawn across the cosmic map, was about to become a flashpoint that could ignite a conflict spanning galaxies. Minutes later, Earth Command responded, their message clear and dire. "Hold your position, Commander. Negotiations are underway, but be ready for all outcomes." The waiting was the hardest part, each second stretching into infinity. Celine watched the stars, thinking of the vast distances that separated her from home, from safety. Her mission was to explore, to bridge gaps between civilizations, not to stand on the precipice of war. As the crew awaited the Krellak's next move, Celine stood resolute at the helm. Her ship, a beacon of human curiosity, was now the lone sentry in the shadow of conflict. But she was not just any commander. She was Celine Hart, who had navigated more than just starfields in her career. She had steered through political minefields, brokered peace with volatile species, and above all, kept her crew safe against odds. The chapter closes with the Herald bathed in the ominous glow of the approaching Krellak's warships, a stark contrast to the darkness of space around them. The silence of anticipation hung heavy as Celine prepared to face whatever challenges lay ahead, her resolve as unyielding as the metal walls that cradled them in the void. The bridge of the Herald had transformed into a chamber of suspense, the tension almost tangible as the silhouettes of Krellak's warships materialized from the cosmic veil. Commander Celine Hart's silhouette was backlit by the luminescent panels, her figure a bastion of calm in the storm of uncertainty that enveloped her crew. "Visuals on main," she commanded, her voice cutting through the murmur of anxious whispers. The view screen flickered to life, displaying the imposing architecture of the Krellak's fleet. Vessels built like fortresses, bristling with weaponry, their hulls etched with the scars of countless battles. Lieutenant Jax Harrow leaned towards Celine, his youthful face etched with concern. "Commander, they're hailing us again." On screen, Celine responded, bracing herself. The image of the Krellak's officer reappeared, his expression stony. "You have not complied. Your ship remains in Krellak space. This is now a matter of sovereignty and security," the officer declared, his tone harsh and uncompromising. Celine met his gaze directly, her own expression unyielding. "We are attempting to resolve this misunderstanding peacefully. Our navigation systems—" "Your excuses are irrelevant," he interrupted coldly. "Prepare to be boarded. Any resistance will be met with force." The transmission ended abruptly, leaving a heavy silence in its wake. Celine turned to her crew, her eyes sweeping over their apprehensive faces. "Prepare for boarding, but do not engage. We will show them that we are not aggressors. However, be ready to defend the ship if necessary. Jax, continue efforts to reach Earth Command. Update them on our situation." As the Krelax boarding pods clamped onto the Herald with mechanical precision, Celine felt the gravity of the situation settle around her like a cloak. She had been in difficult negotiations before, but the Krelax were notoriously rigid in their views, especially regarding their territorial sovereignty. The sound of metal sealing against metal echoed through the ship as the airlocks were breached. Celine positioned herself in front of her crew, a symbolic gesture of her readiness to face the Krelax first. The air hissed as the doors slid open, revealing a squad of Krelax soldiers clad in armor that gleamed ominously in the light of the bridge. The Krelax commander stepped forward, his gaze sweeping the room before settling on Celine. "You will surrender your weapons and submit to our authority. Non-compliance will result in severe repercussions." Celine's response was measured, her stance firm. "We will comply with your security protocols, but I assure you, we are here on a mission of peace. Let us discuss this like civilized beings." Her offer hung in the balance as the Krelax commander considered her words, his face unreadable behind his helmet's visor. Finally, he nodded curtly. "Disarm and you will be taken to meet with Warlord Vrax Torin. He will decide your fate." As her crew reluctantly laid down their arms, Celine communicated with Earth Command, her message a blend of urgency and diplomacy. "This is Commander Hart. We are being detained by Krelax forces under the threat of hostility. Immediate diplomatic intervention is required." The walk through the Krelax warship was a silent procession, the tension palpable. Celine, surrounded by her crew and their Krelax captors, walked with dignity, her mind racing with scenarios and strategies. Upon reaching the Warlord's command center, the vastness of space served as a backdrop to the grim tableau. Warlord Vrax Torin, towering and imposing, turned to face them. His voice boomed through the chamber. "Humans trespass in Krelax space. Then speak of peace. Your presence here is an act of war." Celine met his gaze, her resolve steel. "It was an error, one we wish to correct. War benefits no one." Vrax's laughter was cold, metallic. "You mistake our restraint for weakness. We are not so easily fooled." The chapter closes with Celine standing before the Warlord, the fate of her crew hanging in the balance. Her diplomatic skills and her crew's resilience were about to be tested like never before, under the watchful eyes of the Krelax and the cold stars beyond. The dimly lit halls of the Krelax warship thrummed with the low hum of the engine core, each vibration a reminder of the dire situation. Commander Celine Hart, escorted by armored guards, felt the weight of countless Krelax eyes upon her as they passed through the central corridor. The Krelax warship was a fortress in space, its interiors stark and unyielding as the soldiers who manned it. In the confinement of a small, austere room designed for high-stakes deliberations, Celine and her senior officers awaited the continuation of their parley with Warlord Vrax Torin. The walls, lined with weapons and banners of the Krelax conquests, told the story of a civilization built on dominance and the subjugation of others. Celine reviewed her strategy, her mind racing through diplomatic scripts and potential outcomes. Her crew, though visibly strained, looked to her for guidance. She offered them a nod of assurance, her confidence in their training and their cause unwavering. The door hissed open, and Warlord Vrax entered, his presence dominating the small space. "Commander Hart," he began, his voice deep and resonant, "your plea for peace comes too late. Your incursion, whether intentional or not, has provided the spark that ignites war." Celine rose, her posture rigid with resolve. "Warlord, I implore you to reconsider. This conflict will bring unnecessary suffering to both our peoples. There is no honor in bloodshed born from misunderstanding." Vrax sneered, his disdain palpable. "Honor? You speak of honor while your ships trespass into our realm. We have observed your kind for cycles. You are weak, spread too thin across the cosmos. Your plea is not one of peace, it is one of fear. Before Selene could respond, an aide whispered urgently into Vrax's ear. His eyes narrowed, and without another word, he strode from the room. The sudden departure left a chilling silence. Selene turned to her officers. Prepare yourselves. War is upon us. We must make it back to the Herald and warn Earth Command. Our survival now depends on our ability to outthink and outmaneuver a superior force. The return to their ship was tense, with Krelak soldiers eyeing them with open hostility. As they boarded the Herald, the reality of their situation settled in. A war, unwanted but inevitable, was now unfolding. Back on the bridge, Selene activated the ship's communications array. Her message to Earth a mix of dire warning and strategic assessment. Earth Command, this is Commander Hart. Diplomatic efforts have failed. The Krelaks are mobilizing for war. We need reinforcements and are preparing for defensive maneuvers. As they awaited Earth's response, the first wave of Krelaks fighters appeared on the horizon, their approach fast and aggressive. Selene's command was swift and decisive. Battle stations. Activate stealth mode and prepare to engage only if necessary. Our objective is to survive until reinforcements arrive. The ensuing battle was a testament to human ingenuity and the tactical prowess of Selene's crew. Jax Harrow, now at the helm of the ship's main artillery unit, demonstrated remarkable skill, downing several Krelaks fighters with precise, calculated shots. As the Herald maneuvered through the debris of destroyed Krelaks fighters, the cost of this skirmish became apparent. Each explosion marked loss and devastation, each maneuver a desperate bid for survival. The chapter closes with the Herald narrowly escaping into the cover of a nearby asteroid field, the ship battered but unbroken. Selene, standing before the main viewport, watched the stars blink back into view as the stealth mode cloaked them from immediate danger. Her heart ached for the coming trials, but her resolve hardened. This war was not just about survival, but about proving the mettle of humanity. The cold darkness of the asteroid field provided a temporary shroud for the Herald as it lay hidden, licking its wounds under the watchful gaze of Commander Selene Hart. Her eyes, reflecting the starlight that snuck past the craggy asteroids, scanned the tactical displays, a mosaic of sensor readings and strategic data that would help shape their next move. Lieutenant Jax Harrow, his youthful exuberance tempered by the gravity of their situation, approached Selene with a mix of hesitation and resolve. Commander, the crew's ready for your orders. We've managed to evade their immediate pursuit, but it's only a matter of time before they find us. Selene nodded, her mind clear despite the storm around them. Jax, have the engineers assess any damage and make necessary repairs. We can't afford to be caught off guard. And get me a secure line to Earth Command. I need to update them on our status and get a sit rep on reinforcements. As Jax hurried away, Selene turned her attention back to the star chart, her finger tracing potential escape routes and counterattack strategies. The silence of the bridge was a stark contrast to the chaos that had unfolded just hours before. Each crew member worked with quiet efficiency, bound together by a shared determination to see their mission through. Meanwhile, Earth Command responded with grim news. The nearest reinforcements were days away, and the political machinations of interstellar diplomacy were complicating any immediate military support. Selene's jaw tightened. They were on their own for now. It was then that an unexpected message arrived. Diplomat Lyra Voss, the Krelaks defector, appeared on the communication screen, her expression earnest and fraught with worry. Commander Hart, I secured asylum within your Earth Alliance, and I bring information that could turn the tide in your favor. Selene listened intently as Lyra disclosed the existence of a Krelak supply route that was lightly defended, a potential target that could cripple the enemy's forward operations and buy the humans much-needed time. This route is a lifeline for their outer fleet. Disrupt it, and you disrupt their ability to wage a prolonged campaign. Armed with this new intelligence, Celine convened her top officers. "We have an opportunity to strike a significant blow against the Krelax. This won't end the war, but it will show them that we're not as weak as they presume." The plan was set into motion swiftly. The Herald, along with 2 other frigates that had managed to regroup, would ambush the Krelax supply convoy as it navigated through a known nebula, using the natural interference to mask their approach. As the human ships positioned themselves, the nebula's eerie glow bathed the bridge in a surreal light, casting long shadows and painting the crew in hues of uncertainty and resolve. Jax manned the weapons console, his earlier hesitation replaced by a focused calm. "Targets approaching, Commander. Weapons are locked and ready," Jax reported, his voice steady over the hum of the ship's engines. "On my mark," Celine commanded, her eyes fixed on the tactical display. Now, the ambush was swift and devastating. Torpedoes and energy cannons lit up the nebula, turning it into a canvas of explosive artistry. Krelax supply ships, caught off guard, were either disabled or destroyed, their escorts scrambling to mount a defense too late to change the outcome. As the smoke cleared, Celine allowed herself a brief moment of satisfaction. They had achieved a tactical victory, but the war was far from over. "Well done, everyone. Let's regroup and prepare for the next phase. This war is ours to win." The chapter closes with the Herald and its sister ships disappearing back into the cover of space, their presence now a known threat to the Krelax. Celine stood on the bridge, her gaze set on the stars that held both promise and peril in their silent watch. Under the cloak of the nebula's swirling gases, the Herald and its allied frigates prepared for the battle that could define their resistance against the Krelax onslaught. Commander Celine Hart surveyed her crew, their faces set with a determination forged in the fires of their recent skirmishes. The silence of the nebula was deceptive, a quiet before the storm they were about to summon. "Status report," Celine commanded, her voice resonating clearly in the tense atmosphere of the bridge. "Shields at maximum. All weapons systems primed and ready." "The crew is battle-ready," replied Lieutenant Jax Harrow, his confidence bolstered by their recent victory. He had grown not just in rank, but in stature among the crew, embodying the resilience and courage that had come to define them. Celine nodded, her gaze fixed on the tactical display. "Very well. Bring us out of the nebula and set course for the Krelax command station. It's time to end this." As the Herald and its squadron emerged from the nebula, the vastness of space opened before them, punctuated by the distant glimmer of the Krelax command station, a behemoth of metal and menace orbiting a desolate moon. This fortress was the nerve center of the Krelax military operations in the sector, and Celine's target. "Launch fighters, target their defense grids. Main guns, hold fire until we're within range," Celine directed, orchestrating the assault with the precision of a seasoned conductor. The fighters, sleek and agile, darted ahead of the Herald, slipping through the Krelax defenses like phantoms before unleashing their payloads. Explosions blossomed against the backdrop of the station, each burst a puncture in the fabric of Krelax superiority. Inside the command center of the Herald, the crew worked in a frenzied yet controlled rhythm, each member attuned to the other's movements. Celine watched the battle unfold, her strategic mind analyzing and predicting the Krelax responses. Suddenly, a massive surge of energy pulsed from the command station. A desperate counterattack. "Evasive maneuvers," Celine shouted, just as the space around them erupted in violent waves of plasma fire. The Herald shuddered under the impact, warning klaxons blaring throughout the ship. "Damage report," Celine called out, gripping the console as another wave of energy rocked the vessel. "Shields holding at 40%, minor hull damage. No casualties reported," Jax responded, his voice steady despite the chaos. Celine peered through the viewport, her eyes narrowing as she assessed the situation. The Krelax were wounded but far from defeated. It was time for a final push. "All units, focus fire on their power core. It's now or never." The combined might of the human fleet concentrated on a singular point, their firepower drilling into the heart of the Krellak's command station. With a final defiant roar, the station's core erupted, sending shockwaves through space and silencing its guns forever. As debris scattered across the void, a heavy silence fell over the Herald. They had done it. The backbone of the Krellak's military presence in the sector was broken. Celine allowed herself a moment of relief before turning to her crew. Excellent work, everyone. Prepare for search and rescue operations. Let's see if there are survivors we can help. As the Herald maneuvered through the wreckage, the reality of their victory settled in. They had not only survived, they had triumphed, proving that humanity was not a species to be underestimated. The chapter closes with Celine looking out at the stars, a mixture of weariness and wariness in her gaze. The battle was won, but the war was not yet over. She knew the Krellaks would retaliate, but for now, humanity had earned a respite, and she had secured a future for her people to fight another day. The wreckage of the Krellak's command station drifted silently across the void like the scattered bones of a slain titan, its glowing fragments casting flickering shadows across the bridge of the Herald. Commander Celine Hart stood motionless at the main viewport, her reflection superimposed against the star-scarred remains of the battle. Her crew worked behind her, murmuring quietly, their voices hushed by a reverent awe. Victory hung heavy in the air, not as euphoria, but as a solemn acknowledgement of the price they had paid. The silence was broken by a soft chime at the communications console. "Commander," Lieutenant Jax Harrow called, his voice tight with restrained emotion. "We're receiving a priority transmission from the Krellak's homeworld." Celine turned, her face calm but cautious. On screen. The screen flickered to life, revealing the face of High Consul Rivik, a senior leader of the Krellak Central Assembly. His expression was weary, and the usual cold, imperious glare of the Krellaks was absent from his crimson eyes. "Commander Celine Hart," he began slowly, "you have achieved what we believed impossible. You have not only defeated our most fortified command post, but have done so without resorting to planetary-level destruction. Your restraint and resolve have been noted." Celine folded her hands behind her back, standing tall before the transmission. "This war was never our ambition, Consul Rivik. We asked for diplomacy. We asked for understanding. You answered with threats and fire." Rivik nodded, the movement stiff but sincere. Warlord Vrax Torin acted beyond the mandate of the Assembly. He will face trial. We have recalled all military operations in human-controlled sectors and wish to open formal peace negotiations. The word struck the bridge like a silent quake. Peace. After weeks of tension, destruction, and loss, it was a fragile word. So small, so easily shattered, but it shimmered with possibility. "I will accept your terms," Celine replied, her voice steady, "provided the treaty guarantees the sovereignty of human territories, formal trade alliances, and shared access to neutral space for future exploration." The consul bowed his head slightly. "Agreed. Let us begin anew." The transmission ended, and for a moment, the bridge of the Herald was frozen. Then, cheers. Not thunderous, but deep and real. Some wept silently. Others clasped hands or dropped into their chairs, overcome with the weight lifted from their shoulders. Celine allowed herself a small smile, then turned to Jax, who stood beside her, eyes wide with disbelief. "You did it," he said, voice thick with awe. "You stopped them." Celine shook her head. "We did it. All of us. You, the crew, even those who didn't come back. They all carried this." Weeks later, the grand chamber of the interstellar accord shimmered with light, its crystalline dome reflecting the glow of distant galaxies. Flags of multiple species lined the circular room, their emblems fluttering in a peaceful artificial breeze. At the center stood a long table carved from obsidian and inlaid with veins of luminous blue quartz, neutral, symbolic. On one side, Commander Celine Hart, flanked by the highest representatives of Earth's Defense Council. On the other, Consul Rivik and Krulak's delegates, subdued but composed. The room fell into silence as both sides reached for their styluses. 2 strokes. A signature. A pause that rippled through time. Peace was signed. As applause rose from every corner of the chamber, Celine found herself watching the crowd more than the papers. Diplomats, soldiers, scientists, and civilians from both sides bore witness. What had begun in fire and blood now ended with ink and the quiet strength of understanding. That night, aboard the Herald, Celine stood alone on the observation deck. The stars glittered with unfamiliar warmth, no longer the cold sentinels of war, but gateways to something more. Exploration, cooperation, perhaps even friendship. Jax approached, now promoted to lieutenant commander. He carried 2 cups of synth brew and handed one to her without a word. "They'll write about you in history books," he said after a long pause. Celine smiled faintly. "Let them write about the peace, not the war. Let them remember that we were underestimated, but never broken." They stood side by side in silence, watching a new dawn rise across the curve of a distant moon, an echo of Earth, of hope, of everything they fought to preserve.